When you're about to upgrade your rig, the first thing that pops into most people's heads is, I don't want to waste money on something that looks great on paper but can't keep up with my games. I felt that exact tug-of-war last month, trying to decide between a custom-built tower and an all-in-one pre-built. I'm not a tech store salesman, just a gamer who's spent a few evenings researching, watching build guides, and scrolling through forums to see what actually works in a real-world bedroom setup. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The MSI Codex R25060 landed on my radar because it promises a solid mid-range gaming experience without the headache of picking each component yourself. The headline specs an Intel Core i5-14400F, an RTX 5060, 32GB of DDR5 RAM, and a 2TB SSD sound like they belong in a high-end machine. But the real question is whether those parts translate into smooth frame rates, low temps, and a system that fits neatly into a typical gaming corner. I spent a weekend setting it up on a 3-monitor 4K workstation, running a mix of fast-paced shooters, open-world RPGs, and some creative work in Adobe Premiere, just to see how it holds up in the everyday chaos we all live in. First off, let's talk about the core performance. The 14400F is a 10-core, 16-thread processor that sits nicely between the entry-level chips and the pricey i7 or i9 options. In practice, I saw it handled Cyberpunk 2077 at 1080p ultra settings with an average of 67 frames per second, and the same game at 1440p medium settings hovered just above 90 frames per second. That jump is mostly because the RTX 5060, while not a flagship, still has 8GB of GDDR7 memory and can push a decent amount of rasterization. If you're the type of player who likes to crank the settings to the max on a 1080p monitor, this combo will feel buttery. If you're aiming for a consistent 144Hz experience on a 1440p screen, you might need to dial down a few shadows or turn off ray tracing in the most demanding titles. What really surprised me was the multitasking muscle. The 32GB of DDR5 isn't just a vanity number. When I had Valorant running in the background while I streamed Elden Ring and kept a Discord voice channel open, the system never stuttered. The DDR5 speed, though not explicitly listed, means the memory bandwidth is high enough to keep the CPU fed even when you're swapping between a game, a web browser full of tabs, and a recording software. For creators who do a little bit of video editing or 3D modeling between gaming sessions, that RAM amount is a genuine comfort zone. Now, the cooling system. MSI's Frozr AI Cooling claims to predict heat spikes and adjust fan curves before temperatures become an issue. In the 3 days I ran stress tests with 3D Mark and a full-screen Assassin's Creed Valhalla benchmark, the GPU peaked at 78°C and the CPU hovered around 72°C. Fans stayed at a moderate 40% duty cycle, which kept the overall noise level down to a soft hum noticeable but not distracting during a quiet coupe session. The AI aspect is subtle. You won't see a flashy interface, but the system does seem to preemptively crank up the fans when you switch from a low-intensity indie game to a heavy shooter. For anyone worried about a noisy tower blowing across a bedroom, this is a practical win. Connectivity is another place where the Codex R2 feels more thought out than many budget rigs. With 6 USB-A 2.0 ports, 2 USB-C ports, one of which supports DisplayPort, and 2 USB 3.x Type-A ports, you can plug in a mouse, keyboard, external SSD, and a headset without reaching for a hub. The built-in Wi-Fi 6 gave me a stable 400 megabits per second connection on my 5 GHz network, which kept online multiplayer lag to a minimum. The presence of both HDMI and DisplayPort outputs also means you can actually run 3 4K monitors if you have the right adapters, a rare feature in pre-built towers at this price point. Speaking of price, that's where the hidden trade-offs start to surface. The MSI Codex R25060 lands in the upper mid-range of pre-builts, typically a few $100s more than a bare-bones DIY build with similar raw specs. What you pay for is the convenience of a pre-tested system, the AI cooling, and the MSI branding. If you're comfortable assembling parts and buying a separate warranty, you could shave off around 1,015% on component cost alone. On the flip side, the tower's case is fairly standard, no tempered glass side panel, just a plain black front. It's functional, but if aesthetics matter a lot to you, the look is a bit bland compared to some boutique cases that flaunt RGB and tempered glass. The RGB lighting on the front is subtle and can be turned off, so it won't dominate a minimalist desk setup, but it also isn't a standout feature. Battery life is not a factor for a desktop, but power consumption does matter for those who watch their electricity bills. The 14400F and RTX 5060 together draw roughly 250 W under load, which is moderate.